3 ribs found the practice wall before I did. Momentum doesn't care about rank, and neither, it turned out, did she. I'd like to say I saw the second charge coming. I didn't. Grexmall's shoulder was still sliding off my collarbone when Thork's shadow swallowed the light, and somewhere behind the both of us, unhurried footsteps ticked across the gymnasium floor like something counting down. I should back up. 3 days before I introduced my spine to reinforced academy flooring, I made the mistake every Hive World elder warns you against. I decided a quiet human was a boring one. She'd been sitting alone at a corner table, both hands wrapped around a cup of something that sent up thin curls of steam. 4 compound eyes give you excellent peripheral vision, and I spent several minutes using mine to catalogue her: small, pale, motionless, forgettable. I told my friend Hisker as much. He flicked his tongue at the air and told me her scent carried warning markers, the kind his people had learned to respect over 10,000 generations of hunting. I told him his ancestors had never met a tall and armored knight either, and stood up anyway. The whole cafeteria went quiet when I reached her table. I liked that. I asked her loudly how it felt to be the frailest thing in the room. She didn't look up. She took another sip from her cup, and I remember thinking the silence itself was an insult, so I told her exactly what her species were: mud-world stragglers who'd begged their way into a seat they hadn't earned. That was when she set the cup down. The click of it against the table was very small and very loud. 12 Gs, I told her, when she asked what my carapace could survive on entry. I said it with my chest swelling because it's the standard for every civilized species in the sector. She nodded like I'd confirmed something for her, then asked about my pressure tolerance, my thermal range, my radiation ceiling. I answered each one, proud, until I noticed the room had gone very still around us, and I didn't know why. 27, she said finally, setting her own numbers against mine one by one, pressures that would have folded my exoskeleton like wet paper, temperatures that would have boiled my hemolymph or frozen it solid, and radiation levels that made my standard cosmic background sound like a nursery reading. Then she smiled, and it was worse than the numbers. We're also the only species that's ever dropped an atomic weapon on our own homeworld, she said, almost apologetically. Not for fun, exactly, but you get the idea. I don't remember deciding to step backward. My legs simply did it. She stood then, barely past my shoulder height even standing, and told me the real difference between her people and mine wasn't strength. It was that humans had grown up on a planet actively trying to erase them, and had answered every extinction event by getting quieter, not louder. We freeze, she said. We watch. We calculate. And then, when it's worth it, we finish the thing that started it. She told me I'd mistaken her stillness for weakness, and that this was, historically, the last mistake a great many things had made about her species. Then she picked her coffee back up, said something about sleeping well, and walked out, leaving me standing in a cafeteria full of alien students who wouldn't stop glancing at me for the rest of the week. Which is how, 3 days later, I ended up recruiting Grexmall, Slix9, and Thork, and cornering her in an empty gymnasium to settle what words apparently hadn't. She was already stretching when we arrived, moving through some kind of warm-up with an unhurried precision that should have told me something. It didn't. I told her that today, actions would speak instead of her clever mouth. She looked at the 4 of us, a tall and built like a battering ram, a cyborg bristling with reinforced steel, an Ursine mountain of muscle, and me, and sighed like we'd interrupted her. Give it time and most fights end themselves, she said, rolling her shoulders in a way that made the room feel smaller. But if you're set on this one, let's not waste the morning. Slix9 went first. His enhancements should have made him too fast to track, and they were, right up until Luna simply wasn't where his claws arrived. She dropped under the swing, hooked his legs from beneath him, and was already back on her feet before his own body hit the mat. You commit about 3 seconds before you strike, she told him, conversational as ever. The hardware's wasted on that. Grexmall charged next, lowering that horn built to punch through barricades. She let him get close, closer than I would have dared, then simply wasn't there when he arrived, and his mass carried him straight into the wall hard enough to shake the rafters. She called out something about momentum needing somewhere to go. That's when the wall met my ribs, because Grexmall's rebound sent him straight into me, and Thork's charge folded in right behind. I remember the two of us going down together, and somewhere above the tangle, her voice, still perfectly calm, explaining a leverage throw like she was reading from a manual as Slick's 9 sailed past us into a rack of equipment. Grexmall staggered up for one more run at her. She didn't dodge this time. She let him graze past and slapped him, open-palmed, almost gently, across the side of his skull. He roared and charged again. She did it again. By the fourth pass he could barely stand, breathing like a bellows, while she hadn't so much as raised her pulse. "We used to run animals exactly like you down with sharpened sticks," she told him. "Not because we were stronger, because we could outlast anything." By the time I dragged myself upright, the other three were groaning on the mats, and she was walking calmly toward the door, stepping over Slick's 9's twitching leg without breaking stride. She paused there and looked back at me, not with triumph, which somehow made it worse, but with something closer to disappointment. "This is over," she said. "Not because I beat you, because you finally understand what you're looking at." And then she was gone, the door hissing shut behind her, and I was left kneeling in a gymnasium full of my own poor decisions. Professor Clickath found me there. She'd apparently watched the entire thing from the observation gallery, and she helped me up with more gentleness than I deserved. "You wanted proof," she said. "Congratulations. Do you understand now what a Class 12 Deathworld produces? A species that survives an extinction event roughly every 65 million years and calls the ones after it evolution rather than tragedy. You called her fragile." She let that sit, then went further, her voice carrying to the others still picking themselves off the mats. "They reached orbit before they reached peace among themselves. They split the atom before they'd finished learning to trust one another with it. And you decided the quiet one was the safe one to provoke." I asked her how one small human had put 4 of us on the floor without landing a single injuring blow. "She didn't need to," the professor said. "She needed you exhausted and honest with yourselves. That's the whole strategy. Humans don't overpower a problem. They outweight it, then solve it with the least force the situation will allow." She studied me a moment longer, her mandibles clicking in that way I was learning meant something between pity and respect. "She warned you exactly what she was, in that cafeteria, days before any of this. Most species don't listen the first time. Few get a second chance to. You have one now. Use it or provide the rest of us a very thorough case study." I didn't see Luna again until the following week, in the same cafeteria, at the same table, a fresh cup steaming between her hands. I made myself walk over slower this time, no crowd gathering, no mandibles clicking with borrowed confidence. I told her, as plainly as I could manage, that I'd been a fool and that I understood now why she'd sat so still, and why that stillness had never once meant she was unarmed. She studied me for a long moment, the way she'd studied Grexmall's charges, like she was deciding whether I was worth the energy. Then she nodded once and slid a second cup across the table, one she'd already poured before I'd even crossed the room, steam still curling off the top of it, waiting for someone who hadn't arrived yet.